Hi, I'm Kara Stern, host of Snack Size PD, a series which aims to give a boost of inspiration to over Zoom teachers. And today's topic is tech and equity. I am so happy to welcome Victoria Thompson, whom I've gotten to know via her quite wonderful Twitter feed. Victoria is a former math teacher, a current STEM coach, an education and technology consultant, and an NCCE learning specialist, all of which means you've got a lot of wisdom to share with us. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So our goal for today is to offer some easy to implement, actionable advice for teachers who want to make sure they're taking equity into consideration with regards to their tech use. Because this is snack size, I've got just 3 questions for you, okay? Okay, here we go.
Ready.
Awesome. All right. So number 1, when I think about equity in school or in the classroom, I have a framework to guide me for curriculum, for instruction, even for student discipline, but not one for tech. Could you sketch one out for me?
Yes. So if I were to begin, I would say start with your school's mission, and then from there, the vision. Mission kind of guides overreaching principles as to what you'd like for your school and your students to achieve. So for example, let's say that by the end of 5 years, this is like a very lofty mission statement, right? Every student will be proficient in word processing, multimedia presentation creation, and just different types of accessibility technology, things like voice to text, things like screen readers, all that stuff. So that's kind of like the broad mission. The vision are the steps that get people to where they need to be. And that's, I feel, where the equity piece comes really into play. Because people can say whatever they want, they can have whatever missions they want, but it's the vision that actually gets them to where they need to be. Things to keep in mind, of course, when you're crafting that vision, because this is really going to lead to your framework, right? How many students have devices of their own? How many students have devices that will need to be provided by the school or district? How many students have reliable internet access, both in school and at home? How many teachers, of course, are apt to using different types of technology? Also thinking about different considerations for platforms, right? Do students see themselves in the platform? Is there like a diverse set of resources and populations that people can pull from, right? And utilize to the best of their ability alongside the curriculum. So start with the mission, go to the vision, and then from there you can actually outline steps to get to where you need to be. So if I want all of my students, for example, to be fluent in word processing, and let's say that I'm working at an elementary school, well, the skills of a kindergartner are going to be different from that as a 5th grader, right? How do we make it accessible for everybody across the board? So in kindergarten, it might start with just typing small, simple words. We might do sight reading directly on a word processor, and then they practice typing these words together. In 5th grade, it might look something more like creating a whole scale presentation, right? Typing summaries, paragraphs, essays, whatever they want into a word processor, and then maybe even up-leveling that and putting it into some sort of presentation. So there are going to be different kind of benchmarks depending on where a student is. And then also, of course, if we consider learning needs, if I want for all of my students to access a word processor or access a word processor, still a little early here. Something that I could do is make sure that there's voice to type, right? Making sure that, there's screen readers, making sure that there's line focus, making sure that there's translators for English language learners. So when I think equity, it's not just who has the tools and how many tools do we have, but how can I make sure that everybody knows how to utilize that tool?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that you've given this really nice structure for kind of top level thinking from a school's perspective of how to make sure your school community is,
right.
is thinking from an equity perspective about technology and technology use. So, all right, so my next question is a little more granular. Because the next step would be implementing, right? So let's say I'm returning from spring break, as people are doing right now, and my kids are coming back face to face, which is exciting. And I'm thinking a little bit ahead about this issue of technology. We've
Oh, Kara, I think you're frozen. Oh, hello, can you hear me now?
I can. Did I lose you
Okay,
for
got it.
a second?
I think you froze for a second. Could you repeat that question?
I could. So,
Okay, awesome.
and
No, no
I'll
problem.
repeat it more concisely. Zoom life. No, my question is, people are going back to school now. Kids are going back to school, and we're going to lose some of the technology that we've been relying on, but some of it we want to hold on to, right? So I was thinking about the granular issue of if I'm a teacher who wants to do like an inventory of tech equity in my teaching or my classroom, how would I go about doing that?
Yeah, so you just spoke honestly to what I'm experiencing right now with my school site. We have 9 weeks left. We are returning hybrid next week, but only 30% of learners, which we don't know who they are yet. So it's going to be like surprise. And we also don't know which teachers are going to be coming back yet, because some might need like accommodations or feel more comfortable staying home. All this to say, that with a hybrid solution or blended learning or whatever we might have right now, it's going to be very difficult because even the kids that are coming to school, right, if it's only 30%, then 70% of their classmates are still going to be on Zoom. So they're going to still be on their computer anyway. They'll be physically in a room with other kids and teachers. But at the end of the day, that online component, I think, is just not ever going to go away. And I even think of parents, with the different options that they have now, right? Like once you kind of give an option, it's hard to take it away. So my mind also goes to, okay, hybrid and online learning solutions moving forward. All of this to say that implementation is really important. And I think that that tech equity piece goes hand in hand with implementation. I don't want to implement a tool. And when I work with teachers, we really hammer hard on this. We can't implement it if one, it's not accessible. Two, if it's really difficult for the students to use. And three, if it honestly takes more time and capital away from other stuff that we can be doing. Mm-hmm. That's where the inventory comes into play. So when I keep an inventory for myself of my tech tools, I do it in 3 different columns. And if you're listening, like totally, like if you want to modify this, go for it. Daily use, right? So that's every day. Then I have one that's 2 to 3 times a week. That's the middle column. And then I have one where I use it only basically when I'm told to, or, if we're doing an activity that I'm like, oh, this is really cool, but it's kind of a one-off, that's the rarely column, right? So I keep a list of all of my tech tools in a OneNote, and I'm a big fan of OneNote. It just kind of keeps me organized. If your school has like a Microsoft 365 or Office 365 account, then you have OneNote. Like if you use Outlook, then you have OneNote. I keep everything organized there. And I look at why I use the everyday, but I don't really use the rarely, and that's kind of my initial equity inventory. I use Pear Deck because I love the templates. I love how customizable they are. I love that my students are engaged. I love that every time, I do a PD using Pear Deck, teachers light up. That's why I use Pear Deck. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I use it, but when I think from that equity piece, that is so crucial to me. I also love how students see themselves in the drawings and artistic representations in Pear Deck, which is something you don't really see a lot. So that's why it's high on my list. Things like PowerPoint, high on my list because of the accessibility features. You can actually take a Word document and turn it into a PowerPoint, which is pretty cool. That's a time saver for a teacher and a time saver for a student if they're trying to create a presentation. Same thing with Book Creator, which is a really cool app where students can take what they've written and then they can actually create a living electronic document of that book, right? Wow. They like that they have agency. They like that they can see themselves in their writings, and it's more than just text on a Word document. It's actual like, oh, I'm creating like an avatar of myself. Oh, I can have backgrounds. Like it's just very cool for them. So when I look at my always or everyday, side, that's kind of what I look for my tech inventory. And that's where I start. And then I'll also do the same with like, my sometimes and then my rarely. But then what I do with the tools that's on my everyday and sometimes some in my sometimes is I'll just, ask my students directly, hey, how do you feel about utilizing these tools? What do you like? What do you dislike? And typically that's just like a quick survey. I'll do it on like a Google form or Microsoft form. And it's just, here's the tool. on a scale of 1 to 3, because I find 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, because I get it. Mrs. Thompson, what's the difference between like a 3 and a 4 or like a 4 and a 5? So 1 to 3 is easy, right? 1 is I'm not a fan of the tool. 3 is I'm a fan. 2 is somewhere in the middle, right? So I give a sliding scale for my students and my teachers if I'm doing PD to select from, and then any applicable commentary on just how they like to use the tool and whether or not they feel the tool suits their learning needs, or if I'm working with adults, their PD needs. And then what I do, of course, is I'll take that feedback and then I can look at other platforms or adjust the platforms that I'm using in order to accommodate that.
Well, that is like so concrete and helpful. Thank you for that response. And here's my last question. Even though I have like 50 follow-up questions, I've limited myself to 3.
That means we have to do this again.
Well, that would be great. I already have a topic in mind for the next time, which I'll tell you in a minute. But so here's my last question. My last question is, I mean, you talked really glowingly about Pear Deck. So maybe that's your answer, but do you have a go-to platform or a go-to resource that you recommend for educators who are actively working on this aspect of their teaching practice?
Ooh, okay, so I've actually got 2, if I can, or maybe even 3, if I can speak on 3.
Okay,
so 1 is an actual platform, and then 2 are resources, but they're also free courses that teachers can take to hone in on this kind of stuff. So if teachers are looking for professional growth, or even if you're an administrator, regardless of where you are in education, I think that these are really good programs that everyone should go to, and they're free. So I'm going to mention them. So the first, of course, the platform, I have to go with Pear Deck. I just think that they've done so much awesome work with just the equity piece. And thinking about how equitable solutions play into classrooms. I've also used Pear Deck asynchronously with students, and I'm in Seattle, China, right? With my parents in New Jersey. I mean, I've used Pear Deck in lots of different situations, and I just love how fluid it is. And again, that's that equity access piece, because if a student can access it from China when I'm sitting in Seattle, then I think that's pretty cool. They also, to date for me, I think has been the only ed tech company that has released an equity statement and also an anti-racism statement, which I've never seen before. So when I look at companies, like, it's not top of mind for me, but it is something that I look for as to, are they making just kind of different types of steps and opportunities to learn more about this kind of work. And I see a lot of growth. And I've seen a lot of growth, for them in that area, which I think is really, really neat. And then also, of course, just from the instructional curriculum goal aspects, tons of templates, for critical thinking, math for students that are pre-K through 2. I mean, it just runs the gamut of all the cool things you can do. So Pear Deck would have to be my pick for the platform. Now, when it comes to the actual programs, the first I'll mention is the Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert. So if you join the Microsoft Educator community, and I am one, so I always have to give it a little bit of a shout out. They have all of these free courses for educators. Am I allowed to share my screen for a second?
Yeah, please.
Okay, give me just a second. I'll bring it up. Microsoft Educator Center courses. And I'll also, once it's time for the other one, I'll pull that one up too. Awesome. Okay, so we're right here. I'm not signed in right now, but that's okay because I can still see everything. And it's a free account, right? So you can just sign up and you're like, hey, I want to take courses. If you go to training and you go to courses, there's also learning paths, which are kind of like graduate level courses or PD courses, things like that. And they also have a lot of cool free webinars and online events for teachers to go to. But if I specifically go to courses, right, things like privilege and fragility, right? How does my power and privilege marginalize others or have the potential to? This is Microsoft, right? So the fact that they're saying this and having this for educators alongside technology, this is huge, right? Identity, who am I as a person? Bias, right? How does what I think and do impact others? Anti-racism, how do I bring this work to my students? And then if we go even further, I mean, of course, they've got some very specific stuff, for products and whatnot, but, leveraging data for action. If I've got, like a cohort of students that aren't doing so hot on a topic or on a unit, how can I actually leverage that data into actionable change? Cross-curricular approaches, and of course, things like coding curriculum. I love Bunsey too. So I love just all the innovative aspects that are there. But yeah, just lots of neat opportunities for teachers, I think, to get creative and learn. So for example, if I click or select the identity one, it'll tell you about how long it would take. So this would take about an hour. Date published, a little bit of information, right, about the different types of learning path and if there's a precursor course, but basically what you should be able to do and understand at the end of it. They also gamify it. So when you're complete, you get a badge. And I love that aspect. I just think that's super cool. But once you progress with different courses, then you have the option to apply for something called a Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert. And it basically, you talk about your journey, with confronting equity in tech, using lots of different types of educational products. Of course, primarily some of the Microsoft stuff on the courses. But if you've done anything in your classes that you think highlights the intersectionality of technology and equity, then totally. Once you are accepted, or if you do get accepted, then you join a cohort of awesome educators. And we have, standing meetings pretty frequently. There are opportunities to engage and interact. You kind of get special access into some of their tech equity things. So that's kind of like my push whenever teachers are like, well, I want a certification, right? But some of them are very pricey and I want to get involved in a community of educators. I highlight Microsoft. I think that Google's is cool, but for Google, you have to pay for all the tests, whereas this is free. So if you're looking for free, I do recommend Microsoft. The next one I would recommend is the National Geographic Educator Certification. And I also have this one as well, so I can personally vet. This was one of the highlights for me. It's all about interdisciplinary teaching and change making, not just with the earth and our relation to the earth, but equity and creating experiences for us to build relationships with colleagues and learn more about other folks. And then for us to make sure that we're giving the best experiences for our students. It is a free professional development program, mostly pre-K through 12. But we also have the formal and informal educators. So if you're a tutor, if you're part-time, whatever, you can totally do it. What's really, really neat, because I don't think it's open, so I can't click on anything specifically, but it's not just the skill building where you learn about those real world problems and you really do lean into it, right? Like as a educator, but the networking aspect gives you insight just as to what other folks are dealing with in other areas of the world. And then on top of that, how equitable situations and equity is viewed again in different areas of the world. And you learn and you lead and you build off of each other there. And then if you do get accepted again, because it's a bit of a process. So similar to the Microsoft one, you do have to create like a final product, either like a video or slideshow. You submit it with a lesson plan, you do the lesson plan with your students. It's a very comprehensive process. But you do get access to different types of programs, classroom connections, the National Geographic Explorers, that's a really cool one. And then you can also be a fellow with National Geographic, which is neat. So again, it's that equity piece, it's the technology piece, because of course it's all through this platform, but this will be the last thing I say. National Geographic Education has a lot of really cool stuff. And resources for students that I think are not just equitable, but it's just so cool. In any subject, right? They've got conservation, arts and music, anthropology, engineering. And they're vetted, right? For teachers, by the organization. Lots of different types of grades. You can look for activities, articles, collections, infographics. So that's kind of like a resource that you can use too. And if you want to take it further, I definitely would go for the certification. And it's free.
Amazing. I didn't know about either of those things. Incredible.
Yeah, they're really cool.
Really cool. Thank you so much for sharing those. Wow. I want to get that National Geographic certification.
It was awesome. And I think it only took me, because it's in like different types of cohorts. So I started, I believe it was fall 2019. and I obtained it winter 2019. So it was about like 5 to 6 months start to finish, but I mean, so much fun, because we have our discussion boards, we have our meetings, you get a mentor that walks you through the process. You get to create a lesson, and the lesson then receives feedback, from the community that you're a part of. It's a very like equity focused and also collaborative professional learning community. And I still talk to some of those folks today,
Wow.
which is really neat.
Wow, that is amazing. Wow, thank you so much for sharing all of this like amazing wisdom and resources, frameworks, like amazing. Folks, like out there, if you do not follow this woman on Twitter, I recommend giving her a follow. It's Victoria the Tech, right?
Yes, it's at Victoria the Tech, all one word. Yes.
All right.
Tech,
awesome.
like TECH. Yeah.
All right, and then you can keep getting more wisdom from her, and ideas and resources. So wow. Educators out there working hard, thank you so much for all that you do. And thank you, Victoria, for joining me today. Thank you, anyone who's watching, for joining me today. Please hit the like button, subscribe, tune in again. Goodbye, good teaching to all.
Thank you.